All right, welcome to the lecture on the Declaration of Independence. The essay prompt here is just to discuss the structure, political use, and philosophical nature of the Declaration of Independence. So in this segment, we will be looking at the background leading to the Declaration of Independence. So there's basically two ways of breaking this up: the external forces and the internal forces. What was happening to the colonies, what was happening within the colonies. Externally, the final movement towards independence began in August, as late as August 23rd, 1775, when King George III refused to receive the Olive Branch Petition. So that document, written by John Dickinson for the Second Continental Congress, expressed colonial hopes of reconciliation and asked the king's help in restoration of peace. So it's basically saying to the king, please, let's get members of our leadership and members of the leadership of Parliament, and can we all sit down at the table and find a workable peace. The king not only rejected the petition, but issued a proclamation declaring the American colonies to be in a state of open rebellion. And we'll get, this was depicted pretty well in John Adams' series from HBO, so we'll watch a little two-minute segment of King George's response to the Olive Branch Petition.
To shoot them. The proclamation by King George III. Many of our subjects, misled by a desperate conspiracy of dangerous and ill-designing men, have forgotten the allegiance which they owe to the power that has protected and supported them, and have declared rebellion and traitorously levied war against us. It is the better part of wisdom to put a speedy end to such disorders. We have thought fit to issue our royal proclamation that all our royal officers, both civil and military, are obliged to suppress such rebellion and bring the traitors to justice. When the unhappy and deluded multitude, against whom this force shall be directed, shall become sensible of their error, I shall be ready to receive the misled with tenderness and mercy. For those who persist in their treason, the punishment shall be death by hanging. Given in Parliament this 26th day of October in the year 1775. God save the King.
So, after this is rejected, Dickinson and Jefferson's drew up a declaration of causes and necessity of taking up arms. This was on July 6 of 1775. The document rejected the idea of independence, but did insist Americans would rather die than be enslaved by the tyranny of King George III. On December 23rd, King George III issued a royal proclamation closing the American colonies to all trade and commerce, effective March 1st of 1776. This action made the resolution of April 6, 1776, which opened the ports of the colonies to trade and all nations except Great Britain, a necessity. This resolution was in essence an economic declaration of independence, an important forerunner to the political declaration of independence of July 4th, 1776. In order to protect themselves and in anticipation of the king's actions, in November 1775, the Second Continental Congress had appointed a committee of secret correspondence to establish relations with and to seek aid from friendly European nations. In December, the colonists heard from their agents that France would consider offering its support. By March of 1776, both France and Spain had agreed between themselves, although nothing was formalized at this time, that it was to their interest to help American colonies in their battle against the British by supplying them with war materials. So, because of King George's proclamation of December 23rd, 1775, and the colonists' need for war materials, the April 6th, 1776 resolution of economic independence was a necessity. The significance of this economic declaration is that it would make a political declaration necessary. On June 11th of 1776, the Congress authorized a committee made up of Jefferson, Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston to prepare a draft of a formal Declaration of Independence. The job of writing the document was given to Thomas Jefferson. And you can see that in, that's the scene that opens up automatically in this lecture series of Thomas Jefferson reading his draft and it being revised by Franklin. So on July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress voted 12-0 for independence, with New York abstaining. And on July 4th, the Congress again voted 12-0 to approve the document. New York abstained again, but on July 9th approved the declaration. So you got those two factors, the rejection of the Olive Branch Petition, which took a lot of people kind of who were fence-sitting on the idea of independence off of that fence and in favor of it, and then this need to declare economic independence in order to gain France and Spain's approval, and even the Dutch. What's important to understand, though, about this Declaration of Economic Independence is that the colonists were already economically independent. They were able to reopen up the ports. They had been trading without the approval of Great Britain all along. And so, in many ways, the Declaration of Independence wasn't trying to change something from the Americans' perspective. It was to prevent the British from changing something. That is, to make America dependent on Great Britain. So, the internal forces that were going on, there's two events that we need to look at. In July 1776, in January 1776, two events helped push America's mind to a final acceptance of independence. First came the news that English were sending German soldiers called Hessians, because many of them came from the German Principality to fight against them. Almost 30,000 of the German mercenaries ultimately served with the British Army during the war. The colonists associated the mercenaries with looting and rape and feared that the Germans would run amok them. The second decisive event occurred in January of 1776, when the publication of Common Sense by Thomas Paine, one of the most potent pamphlets really ever written. Paine, the son of a corset maker, came to Philadelphia as a poor, simple person, and found work in the Pennsylvania magazine with the help of Benjamin Franklin. In Common Sense, he advocated the immediate declaration of independence on both practical and ideological grounds. Paine did much to push public opinion to accept what had in fact become inevitable. In clear and persuasive prose, Paine listed the advantages the colonies would enjoy once they had formed themselves into an independent nation. Free trade with other countries around the world, release from England-European conflicts, freedom from having to appeal to a court 3,000 miles away, were just some of the few of his practical arguments for independence. He had very pithy language that was very appealing to people, and he would be able to draw up on very powerful metaphors As he wrote, it's just an example, there is something very absurd, he insisted, in supposing a continent be perpetually governed by an island. And so this resonates with people. People would be able to see the image of this big continent, America, being pushed around by this little tiny island, Great Britain. Right? And so people would use this document to affirm feelings that they already had. And it also got people who might have been sitting on the fence about the whole idea of independence to come along, and it might have persuaded a few people who either hadn't thought of independence or had rejected independence. Common Sense attacked not only King George III, but more radically the idea of monarchy itself. Paine stated plainly that monarchy was a corrupt institution and called George a royal brute. About 150,000 copies were sold in the critical period between January and July, and total sales were over 500,000 copies. During the Revolution, Paine continued to write and to publish his views on the Patriots' cause in a series of papers called The American Crisis. George Washington was so impressed with Common Sense that he ordered his commissioned officers to keep a copy at all times, and when they saw morale getting low, as it often did during this war, it would be not an uncommon thing to read passages from Common Sense to remind the soldiers of why they were fighting this war. So hence, Common Paine, like Sam Adams, was extremely important propagandist who molded the American mind toward independence. At the end of the war, Paine was penniless, basically, having refused all profits from his writings so that the price would be low enough for all to have access to them. So, very idealistic man, and very powerful writings for this cause that he believed in. So there you have it. This is just basically the background, the external forces, the Olive Branch Petition, economic independence, the Hessian soldiers, and Common Sense. These four things, along with other factors, of course, but these four things in that year before independence, from 1775 to 1776, are going to push the once American colonies to become American states and to be an independent country. All right, that concludes Learning Objective 1. I will see you in Learning Objective 2.